Oh snap. Alright guys, welcome back. This is Suede playing Atrocity, playing Chapter 4, which came out a lot sooner than I was expecting. I was thinking it was going to be a couple of weeks, but literally came out the day I finished recording my last video, so, cool. Let's just hop right in. After his ride with Andrew, Robert went to his rented apartment. He thought it would be a great idea to simply go to bed and conk out for 10 hours or so. Or longer. He knew that sleep would not come easily to him. So much has happened in the last few days that he tied himself in knots and lost any confidence. He only could expect something awful to happen. Any rustle or creak in the old house made him frightened. Robert strained his eyes and ears as he was looking around anxiously. He started looking closer, with apprehension, even at the most common object. A long time ago, more than 100 years ago, this apartment was a part of a large mansion owned by a merchant. It was never properly renovated over the years. Floorboards and stair steps were squeaking. All kinds of obscenities were covering dingy walls. Still, despite its devastation, the mansion was an interesting place. Here and there one could see some neat old stucco molding. Some doors and even door handles were still the same as with the original owners. Okay. Original owners. Erect old sofa, grandpa's chair with broken armrest, and rickety table were there in Robert's only room. Nails stuck into the wall served as a wardrobe. This was a cheap place to live, in which Robert could get for cash. It was meant to serve as a base during his digging ventures, but now it has become a place where Robert was trying to hide. There was a loud knock on the door. Robert shuddered despite himself. He did not get it right away that his guest, Nick, may have arrived already. He came up to the door, but was not in a hurry to open it, even though he had the handle in his hand. Who's there? Hey, I'd like to see Robert. Is this him? Nick? Yeah, that's right. One moment, please. After some fumbling with the old lock, Robert opened the door. A man of medium height stood there at the doorstep. He seemed to be in his 30s. He had pants, t-shirt, and raincoat on, plus some sneakers. His hair was cut short, but looked quite a bit disheveled. His full, roundish face featured noticeable stubble. Several bracelets with some ornamental script were occasionally clinking on his right armrest. This guy looked so different as compared to the usual type of academic researchers that Robert would rather mistake him for a hippie or representative of some other counterculture trend. Yeah. How are you? Come in, please. They shook hands, and Robert gestured his guest to come in. He entered, hanged his jacket on one of the nails, and then they walked into the room. Andrew said that you were an ethnographer, right? Let's not stick on labels, alright? Well, sure. So, why would you still call yourself an ethnographer? Well, sort of. Do I look like one? Well, I thought they looked a bit different. Please do sit down. It's not a palace, of course, but one can find a seat here. Robert gestured towards the only chair in the room. Oh, that's so sad. Robert felt that his guest looked quite a bit strange. Not that he seemed to be nuts or something, but the unusual thing about this guy was that he did not look like an ethnographer. Sort of. I don't know what an ethnographer is. It's like someone who, studies, different cultures and races, I guess? Whatever. At least, not like some ethnographers whom Robert used to know. More often than not, they all looked like himself. Always on the rocks, unkempt, quite reticent. Nick was quite the opposite. His clothes had a certain style, and he kept smiling. Robert would rather think that he was a hippie. You could see him with a guitar in one hand and with a joint in the other. Yes, the classic hippie. Where do you work? I'm practicing my profession. Dodgy answer. How come? Very simple. For example, right now I'm doing my work, even here in your home. Robert was quite baffled with this answer, so he decided to clarify. What do you mean? It so happened that I wrote several popular science books. Some of them sell well. I decided to come over here because I like mixing business with pleasure. Pleasure is exploring something new, and helping you is something I could call business. So, are you a scientist? A researcher? Yes, you could say so. Yes to both, I guess. Even if the object of my research is very unusual, superstitions. And I am not just gathering all kinds of rumors, but rather searching for unusual events in real life. I see. I simply thought that there's no decent work to find in this town, so... Robert didn't really know what he was going to say next. He realized what made him hesitate. He suddenly felt that his guest only needs some information from him, which he could use in his next book, one that would be displayed in the category Magic, Occult. Robert suddenly felt that he'd rather throw at this ethnographer, but then stopped himself as he decided to wait and see. Besides, he obviously needed information much more than his guest. Well, he was studying all kinds of demons, of course, but Robert knew from his own experience that this had nothing to do with superstitions. Hey, it's alright. It happens. The guest nodded and blew his cheeks. Then he came to the window looking north, where Promgen's outlines were barely visible because of the poplars that have grown sky high. Oh, by the way, maybe you want some coffee? I only have instant coffee, though. That's fine. Coffee would do. One moment then. I'll fix you some. Robert stepped into the kitchen and put his kettle on. He luckily brought some coffee with him when he had traveled to Aksaypolis for the first time. His kitchen was in the corner of a small entrance hall, from where one could easily see all across the room. Robert did not come back to the room. He was standing in the doorway now, unwittingly looking towards the window too. In the distance, one could recognize Promgen's outlines, even though poplars have grown quite high. The pause in their conversation got a bit too long, so Nick decided to cut to the chase. If we're done with intros, Robert, let's talk about the subject matter. Oh, by the way, how are you feeling? I couldn't really get enough sleep. Plus, I can't understand what's going on. Well, it's hard to come to terms with what you've been through. Now, I must ask you some questions in order to have an idea of what happened. Sure. Ask me anything. What was so scary for you over there, at the mounds? It's hard to say, or rather, it's hard to explain using familiar words. Could you still try it? I promise that I'll do my best to figure out what you're saying. Well, at first everything was alright. We got to our location, set up our tent, had our supper too. But as soon as we went to bed, we both had the same dream. And in that dream, some very unusual voice was speaking to me. Could you be more specific? Now, I feel this might sound, on the surface, like complete... Well, never mind. I'll get it right. I've already had experience with things of this sort. Alright, then. Well, in my dream, I was walking between the mounds. It was in the middle of the night, with the necropolis completely engulfed in some fog. And something kept pushing me toward that place where the idols are standing. Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh, of course, I've been there as well. So, I felt as if something kept pushing and pulling me there. I was trying to run away or to hide, but I couldn't. And then I woke up. Did you feel scared? Well, sure. Peter, my friend, he was also scared. Listen. Oh, well, please accept my condolences. Responding to this, Robert only nodded and turned towards the kitchen where the kettle started boiling. Quickly filling 2 mugs, Robert came back to the room and handed 1 mug to his guest. Coffee was very hot, so Nick put the mug on the armrest. Did you get a feeling as if the world in your dream underwent drastic changes? Yeah, I did. And it did change. A lot. I see. What about the voice? Robert paused to think and attempt to remember what it was that he actually heard. This memory was unpleasant, although it was more difficult to describe in plain words just what he had felt. It was a very strange voice, infinitely calm, neutral, and also a very deep voice. Its tone made one believe that whatever it was pronouncing was unquestionable, sort of like a voice of a prophet. Could you make out some of the words? Not a single word, zero. Was it Old Greek, perhaps? No, not at all. I'd recognize that one. So, you're sure that it wasn't Old Greek, right? Robert started fidgeting while sitting on a sofa. He got very upset with the memories of that voice. Well, he never had any clue before that what he had heard could have been some message in a very old language. He simply considered those sounds to be some inconsistent gibberish. Was it a male voice? I'm not sure. What do you mean? It could have been some very deep female voice. Is that all? Can you remember any special features about the sound or the pronunciation? Were you able to remember what phrases sounded like? No, I don't recall anything special. Someone was certainly speaking, but the language is not like anything I would have been able to compare it with. As a historian, I know several ancient languages. I know what several ancient languages sounded like. Here, I could only say that the nose... Oh, this could already explain some things. How? There was this study published recently about a research of the sublingual bone belonging to one of the human species, which had disappeared a long time ago. Those guys, they were speaking about the same thing you've just described, as if their nose was bun. Which species was that? Neanderthals. Are you kidding me? No, why would I? Well, are you saying that some Neanderthal man spoke to me? Or was it his ghost? I'd have a hard time explaining this to you, but, very roughly, yeah, it was a ghost that was speaking to you. I intended to say that I don't believe in ghosts, but after all this, it's time to start believing, I guess. Things at this place here, I'm talking about Aksaypolis, are very complicated. People often hear some familiar languages spoken, including Old Greek. But, so I didn't get to hear something out of the ordinary. Don't flatter yourself. They can sometimes hear these Neanderthal men all right. Have you been at that place too? Sure. And what happened to you after your trip there? Nothing. Nothing? I came over as a tourist to do some sightseeing, so I was not interested in those who lived there. They noticed me no more than they would notice a new tree or an animal. Okay, let's move on. When the poltergeist started, did you see anything? Some visions. What exactly? Some faces or snouts? They were neither human nor animal. Many muzzles, with black eyes and fangs. Just for one moment, I felt as if the darkness started frothing, and each bubble of the foam looked like such a muzzle. Were they looking at you? Yeah, they did. But not too long. In fact, just a moment. As Robert raised his voice, unwittingly, he realized that it was because of his intention to convince himself that nothing of that sort mattered to him. Yes, those muzzles were looking at him. They did, but for only 1 second, as if a longer contact could cost him his life. Did any objects burn in the apartment? No. Are you saying that something of that sort may have happened? Sometimes, when it's a fire poltergeist. Theoretically, it is the most dangerous one, even though it's difficult to establish the body count. There's no official statistics for that sort of thing, you know. Officials will not make public a problematic source of the conflagration. On the other hand, facts about spontaneous inflammation do exist. Yeah, that's actually a real thing. Spontaneous human combustion. Look that crap up. It's crazy. What's that? Oh, you've never heard about it? I don't want to scare you, but sometimes a person gets on fire all by his own. Sort of from within, and he can burn down within minutes. Robert cursed, jumping up from the sofa. The thought was suffocating him that he could, in principle, get inflamed like a match at any moment. And as an aside, this is absolutely a thing. You can look up actual history of cases where this has happened. It's wild. Back to the game. Are you saying that I could burn down just like that? Oh, I shouldn't have told you. Why the did you? Hey, calm down. Such cases are extremely rare, and none of them was ever related to ancient burial grounds. I'll be quiet. Our necropolis, for example, has never ever shown any traits of that sort. Robert, looking closer at his guest, almost believed his words. Okay, fine. I trust you. Let's talk more. Whatever. And the most important question is this. What were you doing at the necropolis? Robert heaved a deep sigh, looking around the room with a stony stare. He had almost no sleep for 2 days in a row, and he was already considering the consequences of his actions. Telling about grave digging wouldn't have been a simple enough affair, yet it was too dangerous. Did Nick know anything about this business that has brought together Robert and Andrew? It was strange, in fact, that he forgot to ask Andrew whether Nick was aware of their business. What if he reported them to the police if Robert were to tell him the truth? Many people hated Tomb Raiders. He felt like fainting only from the thought that he could go to prison without even making any money. It was like robbing a bank with no cash in it. So, what was he supposed to be doing? Nick was at least the only one who knew something about what was going on. However, could he trust him? Ooh, it's the first choice of the chapter, huh? Oh, snap. Oh, man. I mean, I feel like based on what we know about Nick at this point, at least what Robert knows about Nick, he's a friend of Andrew, and Andrew is the one that suggested contacting him for help. So in my mind, that means that Andrew trusts Nick, which means that Robert should trust Nick and tell the truth. It makes sense to me anyway. On the other hand, what does he care about the police if his own life is now at stake? Plus, the fact that Nick does seem to be someone who truly understands a lot of what's been going on with Robert, well, Andrew trusts him too. Okay, fine, it's worth taking risks. That was, let us say, an archaeological expedition, which was not officially endorsed. In other words, this is your flowery way of saying that you went there in order to rob graves, right? You could say that. Now everything is getting much more clear. Well, I don't need any lectures from you. Why would I? What would that change? I don't know. Listen, I'm like a medical doctor for you right now, so if a patient has got the clap, the doctor must start healing him and not telling morality tales about how disastrous that is that sort of dissolute lifestyle. Huh. So strange analogy, but alright. And what about doctor-patient confidentiality? Shall we abide by that? Don't worry, I have no interest in snitching on you to the police, but at least I know now what was the reason for your mishap. Robert had a very uncertain feeling, as if all of his insides were scraped clean. What with the assurances that would be filled again later? He knew that in the worst case scenario, he'd go to jail and poltergeist would go on. When he imagined the thought of a poltergeist in prison with him, Robert found that hilarious. He even smiled. Well, everything could end up quite alright. At least, Nick did not look like a snitch. Right now, he looked much more like a well-fed cat that ate more than his fill while consuming information that was extremely interesting for him. Alright, that's a weird metaphor, I'll let that slide. Still, Robert had his main problem unexplained and unresolved. What should he do about the poltergeist that... I feel like there's a lot of unfinished text boxes. And I don't know if it's supposed to be to scroll. Ooh. Oops. Huh. Oops, no. Okay, anyway, sorry. That was an aside. Okay, I guess you might want to ask a lot of questions, right? Can you tell me more about the mounds? I mean, what happened with me there? And how could I stop this thing from happening to me? Okay, let's do it one by one. Regarding the mounds, no one knows when the site was created. There was only one attempt to There was only one attempt to conduct excavations there, but they ended in a disaster. Still, archaeologists were able to trace the connection of the location to Neanderthals. For thousands of years, many different tribes lived around that place, and they all used the site for burying their dead. I know all this already. I checked out the site's history before going there. Okay, fine. Now let me switch to what you may not know. For example, why they stopped burying anyone there. Robert paused to think about it. He remembered that the cemetery was used last as a burial place in 1997. Something happened there. Some mystical stuff. Oh, wait. Something happened there. Some mystical stuff. I thought, however, that there was some superstitious gibberish. Not really. People suddenly experienced the impact of the same force that you had. Poltergeist as well? Yeah, but not right away. Not after the funeral. Yet, sometime later, relatives of the dead experienced all these strange things. And they were different, not what you got. How is that? Oh, everything worked like clockwork. First, dead relatives would haunt them in their dreams. Then these voices would be heard all around the homes. Did they say something important? Not at all, just some everyday stuff. They would ask for matches, or they'd want some water. Sometimes one could see the reflections in the mirrors. Ugh. Or the figures of the deceased would be seen in the dark hallway. It was as if they forgot that they were dead, so they wanted to come back to their home, as usual. Did that ever stop at some point? Yeah, it would, but each time it happened differently. One family was planning to rebury their grandfather, but then they decided not to when their child drowned. What? Some people moved to a new place, and that was enough for the whole thing to stop. Others were trying to simply wait it out, and indeed, over time there were fewer events of the sort. Eventually they stopped, but something strange was happening. Nick exclaimed these last two words. He got certainly carried away. Robert was all agog, listening attentively. He even forgot about his exhaustion. Those dead relatives would not come alone. They started bringing along some other beings. Those other people had strange garments on. At first they would come together with the dead relatives, but then they would appear all alone. Such new visitors could be seen only for a very short time. Suddenly, like a flash. Who were they? Nobody knows for real. They could be anything, from ancient gods to Martians. My guess is that they are those who were buried a very long time ago before our age. But I must stress this is only my hunch, nothing more. Guys, this is getting fascinating. I am 110% in this. It's possible that they are someone who lived before the Neanderthals. I mean way before. As you understand, I have nothing to confirm such an opinion. Anyway, now you may have an idea why they stopped burying people here, huh? I mean, I guess so. Why are those stone idols standing around there? Ooh. I'm not sure if they're related. Someone put them up, of course. The Cumans, perhaps, which is very likely. Perhaps they knew something about this place. Something special, which we don't know anymore. Robert fell silent as if he was thinking about something. He suddenly remembered that these stone structures were placed in a special, strange pattern. Still, he decided to ask about something that was more important for him to know. What happened to that expedition? To the guys who started excavations there? I heard bits and pieces, but I couldn't find the whole picture. The necropolis was indeed researched in the 1970s. At that time, archaeologists could stay there for a few days. Mostly it was just like in your case. They got bad dreams. They heard voices. Eventually, they fled from there. Why? Were they also regarded as grave robbers? Well, yes and no. But did they survive? What happened with all of them afterwards? I could only find some information about the professors. They are all dead by now. What happened? Old age, I guess. They were all quite advanced in age, and none of them died after their coming back home. Some lived many years after the expedition. Did they experience poltergeists, or Did they experience poltergeists too? Their relatives did not tell me anything about that, but I think that they did. Robert pulled his wits together, trying to find inconsistencies in all this situation, and he felt that he could see what they were. But people keep coming to the necropolis all this time. Perhaps not very often, but still, the place is not deserted. Policemen come by, or teenagers gather in order to smoke grass. Why are they not affected then? Well, because the necropolis wants to defend itself. It's been around for thousands of years, and most of the time it's been resting peacefully. Well, some animals and some people would come and go there, and this site sees some of them as a threat while others get away with it. They don't like all those who may disturb them there, even if that were a potential threat. You were certainly seen as a threat because you came with the intention to excavate their home place. Why are they so concerned about it? Just imagine that you've been staying in some place for a really long time. You mean at the necropolis? Yeah. You become practically one with it, immersing yourself into it to the point that this location is now part of you. Okay? And then someone wants to move you, at least some part of you, to a completely different location. To someone else's home? Exactly. What would you do in such a case? Freak out, go bonkers, play dirty, try going back home? Correct. And now imagine that some spirit or a person hailing... correct. And now imagine that some spirit of a person hailing from the 10th century AD got inside a modern apartment. It can impact everything there, so what would it do? All kinds of wicked things. Of course, switch off the lights, open water taps, burn towels. But this is against what science says. At least this is a result of the many years of my studies, and the only explanation that I can offer to explain this whole phenomenon. And Robert's guest threw up his hands in desperation. When you keep saying they, who do you have in mind? Those who were buried at the site. Hey, there are many cemeteries around the world, but nothing of this kind is known about them. This necropolis is one of its kind, and you already know why. By the way, poltergeists can appear in other places. Those that are much less loaded, we'll say. Well, what do they want from me then? I don't know. I can only guess that you attracted their special attention for some reason, and then they got really angry with you. They gave you a major jolt, and then they followed you from there, by inertia. Well, if you want all this to stop, all you can do is simply sit it out and wait. They will leave you alone. After some time. I see. Another pause. Robert got very exhausted in the course of the day, and the new information felt like an intolerable burden. He would have preferred to disbelieve whatever he got to hear from his guest. He was even eager to ridicule his words. Also, he recalled the other part of the puzzle, which seemed to him to be not less important. I also had another bad dream. I saw myself standing at the entrance to prom gen, even though in real life I've never been there. Nick closed his eyes and thought for a while. This is quite predictable. Prom gen is, after all, an industrial-generated anomalous zone. That's it. Okay. Prom gen and necropolis are inextricably linked. There is some substance there in both of them. A dark force, if you will. I have no idea how and why it could relocate from the necropolis to prom gen. But that is certainly true. It is also a fact that that huge structure was never used for anything. Technically speaking, it has been empty all the time, but it is not a place. But why then this prom gen started bugging me? How do I know? Robert's gaze suddenly hit the ceiling, but then he recovered his temper. Robert thought that he got upset with his questions, or perhaps that he may want to hide something from him, something that Robert considered as being important. Some creatures were seen there, mostly at the Promgen, of course. However, they have appeared at Necropolis too. Creatures? Someone alive, not ghosts? What? I don't think, Robert, that it's a good idea to mess with all that. The less you know, the better you are protected. Holy crap, my friend hung himself. Things fly around my house, and you're telling me not to mess with it? That's right, because otherwise you'd get crazy, sooner or later. I think I've gotten crazy enough already, so why be concerned about it? Fine, okay. If you want to know it, please be my guest. But remember that I was warning you. Those creatures are something that eats human flesh. Gnawed bodies are regularly found there. That is, when they do find them. More often, people simply disappear there. Are they some kind of human? There's almost no information about them. Some people say that they could only see dark shapes flitting about the factory's dark hallways. Others won't be able to tell you anything. Are they active? What do they do? Sometimes someone can be heard yelling at the Promgen. Sometimes there are some noises that cannot be recognized. Police don't go to the Promgen anymore. Why? Because policemen get the same kind of treatment that you did. This was verified many times. Were there any deaths? Yeah, but not all would die right away. Some simply went to the Promgen and never came back. Others got poltergeist manifestations. Would the poltergeist stop after some time? Yeah, it did. Eventually. Have you seen those creatures with your own eyes? Yeah, I have. And what did they look like? Dark shades having animal outlines. They appear in the hallways, stare at you, then disappear. Sometimes they yell and roar. Nick lowered his gaze, making some uncertain gesture. It seemed that he did not want to pursue this topic. Why didn't they... You mean why didn't they eat me? The guest chuckled, looking away through the window. Yeah. I was not a danger to them, I guess. It's also possible that there are not too many of these creatures out there, and they may not need to eat too much. Can they get over here to where I'm staying? No, because they, unlike the dead, are attached to Promgen and to the mounds. Are you absolutely sure? You know, there's nothing absolutely certain in this field of knowledge, but I've been studying this area for years, and I've never heard that they would leave their territory. How can one fight them? There's no way of doing that. What do you mean? I can't believe it. That you never used any charm or magic spell. I didn't. Nick said this as something as a matter of course, but Robert was convinced somehow that his guest was not telling him the whole truth. Still, what should I be doing now? How can I defend myself, or how can I fight this force? Looks like you didn't hear what I just told you. You shouldn't do anything at all. Poltergeists are not as dangerous as it seems. No one has died thus far because lights would go out, graffiti appeared in the halls, or shadows flitting around the hallways. Usually it is good enough if one could wait until this phenomenon passes away, just like bad weather, or domestic trouble. It starts all of a sudden, then it dies down sooner or later. The best thing would be now to stop messing with it. Never again. I mean, it's not like you didn't do anything wrong. I mean, sort of. It's as if you climbed the fence and wanted to steal something in a house, but then its angry owner got out and kicked you. Kicked you out of there. You could run away, but he caught up with you and kicked you one more. He might kick you again for good measure, but it's not interesting for him to keep kicking you. Let's see. You could run away, but if he caught up with you and kicked you once more, he might kick you again for good measure, but it's not interesting for him to keep kicking you until the end of your life. Well, I thought that I should perform a ritual, perhaps, maybe sanctify this apartment. Hollywood. Nick shouted so loud that Robert winced and shuddered. What's that? It's not as simple as it seems. Mass culture made us believe that everything can be bought and sold, and it's not so. You do not become a Christian simply because you started crossing yourself. If you sanctified your home, it does not automatically mean that God's grace dwells in it. All phenomena of this sort are of a spiritual nature. You may use pages from the Bible as wallpaper in your room, yet it would not help. It would not change anything if you won't change yourself. It is not possible to sanctify your home and then leave to rob graves. It doesn't work that way. This is logic. This is logic you don't ever see in ghost stories. I love this. This makes sense. Continuing. But does it work? I'm ready to believe anything. I mean, you should. You must accept it. You went there with your shovel, so you've got what you've got for doing that. And now all I can do is humbly live through it. That's a great attitude. But can I get off the hook? Not really. You'll get off the hooks only if you keep messing with what you're not supposed to be messing with. But I may go off the hooks. Nick started getting angry again. Robert's stubbornness was obviously irritating him. Why do you keep asking questions about these creatures? Because I am scared, and I want to understand what they are, what I'm dealing with. Okay, now you know that. Do you feel better now? No, I have a feeling that you are concealing some things from me, something important. I simply do not want you to do something dumb. You were scared all right, but now you'll get even more scared. Poltergeists present a special danger to those who are afraid of it. Such people want to get rid of their terror by talking to the bottle, or they start doing drugs, or they act really dumb. Whatever they do, it does not take away their terror, it only distorts more and more of their global perspective. Then they may put their neck into the noose, or they get into a nut house, which, by the way, really looks like the next option for you. Why? Because you must keep quiet. Not a word to anyone about what happened. A nut house? Yes, sir. There is this place here in Aksaypolis which they built some 30 years ago. It is a mental hospital. I mean, officially it's for treating psychiatric disorders. But in reality, it's a place to do research with those who got affected by the supernatural phenomenon. Or maybe you were thinking that all this is going on, the authorities have no clue about it. Well, they do, and you must be more scared about them. Perhaps I should just leave from here. No way. Everything will only get more complicated. Where would you find me? What do you mean by more complicated? Whatever. I already told you there's nothing... Whatever. I already told you that there is absolutely nothing certain in this field of knowledge. Fire poltergeist could happen, for example. Anything may happen for the first time. I see. So, zip your lip, meet as few people as possible, and if anything were to start, call me right away, at any hour. Okay, Nick, I gotcha. That's good. Any more questions? I'll call if I think of something. Sure, that's the right thing to do. Okay then, I should be going. The guest got up and put his empty cup on the table. Robert saw him off to the door, shaking his hand again. When he was alone at last, he tried to gather his thoughts, but suddenly realized that he only wanted to go to bed, and that he did not understand any more than when Nick had arrived. He was so tired that he even was not scared anymore. He did not care, one way or the other. Poltergeists, ghosts, ancient people created an unimaginable mess in his head. Robert walked around the room, then he sat down on the bed. He felt like being completely crushed inside. 5 minutes later, with all his clothes on, he succumbed to a deep sleep. Dun dun dun. Wait. Oh, it's restarted. Okay. Man, this just gets more and more intense with every new chapter. I'm getting really into this. Like, the whole explanation, like, with the ghosts and the poltergeists and, like, what does and doesn't work to prevent them or to protect yourself. This is, like, really interesting stuff. I really like the kind of like the perspective they're going with in this story, and like it makes sense to me. I like it. Like the English is still, it's still a little wonky, but I can understand it, and it's not taking away the interest for me. I am super hyped for Chapter 5, and oh yeah. So anyway, thanks everybody who has stuck around this long to watch this series. I highly encourage that you go out and get this game yourself and play around with like different routes and choices you can do. I think this is a lot of fun. It's a really creepy story. And yeah, so see you for Chapter 5 sometime in the future. See ya.